Okay, next on the agenda, Superintendent's report. Kevin?
Curriculum Advisory Council. We have not met. We do have one new course proposal for next year, so I will be touching base with Dr. Keene and Ms. Haruska if it's easier to do a conference call with myself and Ms. Matana, or if we will get together. There's not much on the agenda for that, but we have some time to decide on how we want to handle that. In regards to facilities, I've kept the board abreast of the situation through the weekly updates. The last series of repairs to the pool did not produce the outcomes that the engineer and White and company were looking for. We are still not operating as it was designed. So we are back to the drawing board. They are now working with the drawings and the manufacturers of the silencers. Those are the mechanisms inside the ductwork to minimize vibration and the sound of the airflow through the ductwork, and so they're trying to see if there was a miscalculation in regards to the silencers. Joel emailed Terry Moeller today, who's the lead architect on this for White, and they ensured us they'll be getting us a response shortly. Again, they've been responsive. They're continuing to go to the drawing board as soon as they recognize that their work did not get the desired outcomes. They were quick to connect with me and to let me know that there's still issues and that they're still working to get them resolved. Another thing in your packet today was two drawings, and Mary Ann has them up top on the overhead as well. The first concept is to move the tennis courts over to Veterans Park. Mary Ann, if you can bring up that slide, I think it's the next slide. And this is Veterans Park over in North Riverside, where we already play freshman baseball, as well as all of our softball. And we have been in conversations with all three villages, and only the village of North Riverside had some park space that they would be willing to allow us to build our tennis courts on at no charge. We still have to work out an arrangement of specifics in regards to an intergovernmental agreement, but some of the general tentative topics that were discussed would be that we would install the courts and cover the cost to install the courts. They would then cover the cost to secure the courts, which would be all the fencing as well as the maintenance. And we would do either a 25 or 30-year lease with them, where we are the primary users of that court and of the courts, and when we're not using them, they would be able to be used by their residents. We're still in early preliminary stages, but I wanted to just get some of the drawings out there to the board. These are still drafts. And the first slide that this piggybacks or dovetails with is, we have several life safety issues over at the stadium with our bleachers, both on visitor and home side, as well as our track is now due to be resurfaced. Our warranty's up on our field turf. We have some issues with that. And as you can see previously, where the tennis courts were are now about 130 parking spaces. And those of you that remember, even just 2 weeks ago when we had the special Saturday meeting, when the zoo gates locked, we really do not have any parking. We have the 85 spots on Rockefeller, which we pay about $14,000 a year to the village of Brookfield. And on the school days, we get to use this one zoo lot that we pay $18,000 a year for, which goes up about $1,000 a year, and that's only on school days. So this would definitely provide us an additional 130 parking spots for those days when that gate's locked, or on weekends when we have events or classes or feeder teams and community organizations using our facility. We get a lot of complaints and concerns about parking that's been going on for long before any of us got here. So this would be another way to relieve some of that by putting in the additional parking spaces where the tennis courts and are on that little space of field behind the stadium. These are early drawings. Nothing is to scale. We've also investigated the possibility, and are investigating the possibility, of an 8-lane track. This picture is just of a 6-lane track. We have to investigate the ideas of where we're going to use locker rooms. We have about 150 lockers that our students use throughout the year in the fall as well as in the spring. So we have to identify a place to either put a locker room or figure out if we can build underneath like the previous stadium, the current design. So we're in the preliminary stages. Mr. Walsh and Dr. Keene are working with me and the architect and Joel and Tim McGinnis on this project, and as more becomes a little more concrete and we think we have some more exact drawings and some proposals and some teased out budgets, we'll then start bringing more of that to the board and have Carrie, our architect, present that as well.
Kevin, how many spaces do we have in the zoo parking lot in Rockefeller?
We have about 174 spaces in the zoo parking lot.
Got it.
So, we pay Brookfield, you said about $13,000 a year?
Closer to 14, but yes, 14.
Do we ever attempt to get an intergovernmental agreement like we've been successful with North Riverside? I mean, with the park, we use the ballparks there and they have access to the pool, so are we changing, is money changing hands between North Riverside and us?
No. For the tennis courts?
Right.
No money will be changing hands.
What about the ballparks in North Riverside?
No money changes hand.
Okay.
They use the pool in exchange for us using the softball field.
So have we talked to Brookfield to see if that parking, if we could arrange some kind of intergovernmental?
Yeah, there was, from my understanding is, we already do an intergovernmental agreement with Brookfield for their use of Al Hurt Park for our baseball teams.
Okay.
In exchange for their summer camps, use our pool for 10 or 15 days in the summer. My understanding is this intergovernmental agreement was done during the construction project that the district had to pay to renovate the street and curb it and put that cul-de-sac in exchange for the use and then the leasing of those spaces. So I can have Mr. McGinnis check on the intergovernmental agreement and when that lease or how that the payment system works and see if there's any room to discuss exchange of services or use of a facility. We can look at that. But I believe the original agreement is already an intergovernmental. That's how they got access to make Rockefeller kind of like our street. We have to do the snow removal. We have to do some maintenance on that.
Right, but like North Riverside, the school district had it paved and we did the work on it. So maybe when the first lease is up, maybe there could be a different kind of agreement where
Sure.
money's not changing.
I could check on it. I work very well with their village manager, so I could definitely check on it. Anybody else have any other questions in regards to the facility?
As this progresses down the line, I have a serious concern about the traffic flow on Hollywood Avenue. The fact that the entrance to the parking lot is only several feet away from a grammar school, elementary school, and I can imagine zooming in the morning, zooming in on the afternoon while there's kids around.
So we talked about that at facilities. This is a preliminary drawing. We're not even sure if we'll have an exit or an entrance on Hollywood. We've talked about a couple different designs where everything has to come and go off of Rockefeller. And we imagine that one might be a concern of some of the residents on Hollywood as well as the village. So once again, these are just preliminary drawings to show that, you know, where the parking lot's being imaged at going, but the entrances or exits are not permanent.
I mean, I don't see a problem having an entrance on there. Probably it would make sense is to have that entrance closed at the time of the beginning of school so that people don't go up and down Hollywood. Right. They have to come circle around and then they would have to circle and back go out towards I thought it was Golf Road.
It might have been.
But then during football and what have you at night, that could be open.
You could have a one-way or an exit only perhaps during the day.
Right.
I would have a gate there, keep it closed. But whatever, you guys work at it.
Right, exactly. That's
Part
a
of
very
what-
good concern.
And besides Kevin saying, a part of what DLA is going to do is look at, talk to the village, look at the rules about what would be required and allowed and what wouldn't be allowed or required. So at this point.
Right,
It's
I know, it's
really
preliminary,
just
I know, I'm
first
just
stab
raising
at
the
it, but it's a
whole-
good point.
I'm sure if people see this drawing, they're gonna have a concern
Bunch of
about
high school kids
driving in front of a grammar school,
kids.
yes, yes.
I think right now that road that goes up like this goes into the zoo, so right now they don't connect at all.
Right.
Right.
So they wouldn't be coming in front of the school and getting access to that lot.
Yeah, they would, they'd be coming in off of, Washington, making right-hand turns, zoom into the parking lot.
No, they'd have to come up Golf, like they do now.
Yeah, I think Mike, I think he's talking about there's an entrance. to
There's an
the
entrance shown
school.
Hollywood
just
Avenue.
north of Hollywood.
Right next to the school.
Right
There's a
next to the
space.
school. That's what
Oh, that
Gary's
one.
concerned about.
And we brought that up with our meeting with DLA right away, that
Okay.
that would be a concern. And
Sure.
so we even talked with the cul-de-sac being there might be a possibility to do both entrance and an exit all within that cul-de-sac, so it just spills off of Rockefeller and doesn't have to go on Hollywood. I think we're kind of a long way away from the traffic flow patterns.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to get the concept out there, and we wanted to get the concept on TV so residents can start seeing what we're thinking.
Who would be parking in that lot? So who is the Rockefeller lot designated for? And then
Well, what that would do on school days is right now, we're looking at a couple other options that are very, very, very early. So I don't feel comfortable really discussing that, but right now, we would still have to do the rental of the zoo lot. The idea of the Rockefeller and the football lot during school days would be all student parking. Obviously, students would pay for parking permits, which would help offset our cost for both Rockefeller and possibly some of the zoo lot. Currently, we only have 85 spots on Rockefeller, and then another group of students between the months of October and March. I may be off in my dates. They get to pay a certain amount to park in the zoo parking lot. So what we would hope is that we would pick up those additional student parking and those additional student parking permits to help offset the cost. We still would probably need to rent a lot for the zoo for the short term until we've identified another fix. That we're trying to work some things out with the zoo in regards to that lot and a couple other options. But primarily that would be used by students on school days, and then obviously it'd be open to visitors in the community on weekends and at nights for evening events when the gate's locked or this lot's full. That becomes a second option.
would a two-story lot ever be an option?
We've talked with Carrie preliminary about doing a parking deck. I think you'd get some resistance from residents having a parking garage built right across their street. And then the second thing is that the cost would probably eat up close to 50 to 60% of our 8.9 million just for one parking structure of doing the parking garage.
The important thing is if that would be a possibility in the future, and the thing is, the fact that we own this gives us something to trade potentially. So this is valuable above and beyond just us using it. So
Yeah, I just want, if we remember LaGrange Park by the theater, how contentious the parking, the
Garage.
parking garage was across the street from the theater on LaGrange Road.
on the Grange Road.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
It was very contentious for a long time. But when it was built, it's actually lovely. It's helped their downtown area thrive, and it's always full. So, I mean, it's one of the lessons learned, you know. I mean, it was very important. They needed it. It came to fruition. It didn't look ugly, and it really helped their downtown areas. So, I mean, that was a good model of something that really did work well.
Well, I think Kevin knows. Actually, Kevin, I was here. You mentioned no one was around about
I
this
was gonna
parking.
say that, yeah.
I'm sorry.
This has always been an issue with RB, and it's just a fact of life. And I think it's on Kevin's top list to figure something out and use his negotiating skills and hopefully solve this problem for a long time. Any other comments for Kevin on this?
I just have one last one. Well, if it was a parking deck, we'd probably need both spaces, but I mean, if we were ever gonna barter with Brookfield, we might be able to share the cost of something like that.
The zoo, maybe? You're thinking?
Well, or Brookfield, but when would we be able to let the zoo use it that we wouldn't need it? Or could there be possible?
Holiday Magic.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Certainly, those type of events
Perhaps
they
in the
have.
summer too.
So, yeah, that might give us, like you said, John, some bartering.
So Kevin, you going back to the tennis courts, you mentioned the fact that we would have to, we build them, they're gonna maintain them, they're gonna, and we'd have first right over it. What's the typical life of tennis courts, and what is the lease we're gonna get on it?
25 to 30 years if maintained and surfaced every 6 to 7 years.
Okay,
It's
so,
about, so we were gonna make sure that we did at least the 25 to 30
Okay.
years to guarantee us our investment would be covered.
And you have that kind of requirement on the maintenance, that they'd have to resurface it.
getting out to public to let people know.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a
Yeah.
good point. And then initially, they'd put the fence,
They're
there
gonna
wouldn't be lights, and they would decide
What's the
after a
name?
while, if they thought there'd be enough use, they would be
Maintain.
required for installing
Okay,
lights and
great.
maintaining them.
Great.
I mean, their logic is that they have the space and that it's an opportunity to improve their park
That street,
and provide them more opportunities for residents.
25th place?
Summer opportunities for some of their camps and stuff like that.
That's
So,
25th Street.
in regards to policy, we met last week. We will be discussing the press packet and the technology policy later on in the meeting. And the last thing is the First Avenue bike path. Mike Welch and I have been working on the First Avenue bike path and attended some more meetings. We had a meeting on April 11th that entailed representatives from IDOT, all of the local municipalities, and the Forest Preserve. And we walked the entire, we walked from First Avenue in Ridgewood all the way down to 31st. Are looking at some alternatives and how we can expedite this project. As you know, about 600 feet of that path will be implemented when the First Avenue improvements are done early fall. And, the school district and the local municipalities are working closely with Commissioner Tobalski and the Forest Preserve to say, we should try to get the first leg of this path completed this year. So if the machinery and the people are going to be out there doing the first 600 feet, why not take it all the way to 31st? And so we were talking through that and with IDOT and trying to see if there would be any hurdles. And we also talked about there would probably have to be some cost sharing for all the local municipalities in the school district to help with paving and to offset some of those costs, similar to what we're doing, looking at sharing with Riverside for the other bike path. But Mike, am I missing anything, or am I?
Basically, the thought process was, most of the thought of construction of bike paths is connecting bike paths. And they have the bike path that runs through the Salt Creek, and they have North Riverside has that path that runs along 26th Street off street, west of First Avenue, and 26th Street on street, east of First Avenue. And the construction equipment will be here, I believe, August is the plan for the intersection, and they're gonna do that first 600 feet, which takes us just north of the school's property, somewhere close to where the baseball field is on the zoo's property. And the two towns and the school and everyone was thinking about, what can we do to try to get that completed? Step one, get a path from the school up to 31st Street, let's say. And so we did walk down the path, the right-of-way along First Avenue to try to see what impediments might be there. And except as you got farther north along First Avenue, the right-of-way got a little narrower and a little narrower. But the zoo has indicated that they'd be willing to, allow a fence to be moved to accommodate that if it had to be. They're looking for a cost-neutral situation. And everyone's willing to jump on board and do this as long as it's somebody else's checkbook that opens up and pays it. So the idea out there was floated, if we could maybe somehow share costs to get this first leg done, then we would put in our proposals for grants, etc., and try to get the rest of the path done through our legislators, either the Senate, the reps, or the county commissioners. And it would be nothing more than connecting pieces of bike trail that already exist. You go up to the high school to 31st Street, then we would be looking to connect 31st Street to 26th Street, and we'd be looking to connect from First Avenue all the way out to basically Prairie, where they have a bridge over the Salt Creek that, lo and behold, has a 10-foot wide sidewalk on the south side that's neither connected to a sidewalk on either side. But that bridge was put in place for a future if you wanted a 10-foot wide path to run along the south side. The Friends of the Forest Preserve came several meetings ago and said they have a very hard time flowing in the citizens from Brookfield and LaGrange Park to that bike trail. So again, that would be another natural connecting of the bike trails. And right now, if you were on that bridge and taking that sidewalk east, you'd basically just drop off at the end of the bridge. And so, you know, the idea would be to connect Prairie all the way to First Avenue on the south side of 31st, and then go from the zoo's north entrance up on the west side of Gulfview and go to 31st Street. So everyone agrees it's a doable project. Everyone agrees it's a worthwhile idea. But the thought was, if we could get this first piece done, we could tell all these people who were applying for grants and tell our legislatures that we're serious about getting this done. And if we would share some costs perhaps along the way to get this done, we would hope for to get the rest of the path done with no sharing by anybody, if possible. The next thing we're going to do is, I believe North Riverside has volunteered their engineer to go and get us some good rough numbers as to what we're even talking about. If you go down along First Avenue, there are telephone poles right outside the fence. You know, there could be a natural smoothing around the telephone poles. Moving the telephone poles would probably be some big money to run into that no one's looking to do. So that was kind of the thought process, and we're trying to talk to Brookfield. We're going to try to talk to Brookfield, but most likely anything west of the school or east of the school, you know, doesn't come close to Brookfield, so they might not be interested in joining a project like that. However, when you go from 31st Street west to Prairie, then Brookfield is affected, and maybe they would come to the table and do something to get something in the future. So it's really preliminary plans, but their hope was, what can we put in play to get this first thing done this summer? And then under the next year or two, complete the plan. And so those were the discussions we had, and no one was committing to anything. Everyone has a board that they have to run things by, so that's another impediment. And we told them we would bring to our board what the ideas were, and the next thing we would be finding out what the cost would be to do something like that, and how much it would be if we split it 3 ways, 2 ways, 4 ways, things of that nature. Obviously, the trail doesn't run, you know, anywhere on our property, but it would benefit us. So, you know, would we be willing to think about sharing in that regard? Because, you know, after all, besides the economic engine of getting people to and from the zoo and travelers up and down First Avenue, we're trying to get a way for our kids to bike to school from North Riverside, since we don't have busing, and we wanted to get them a safe way and not through the Salt Creek Forest Preserve path at 7 in the morning where it might not be safe. Is that kind of the thinking there?
Sounded good.
So I'm not sure when the next meeting is. I'll get an email.
We got one April 29th with the commissioner.
April 29th with the commissioner, and we'll see how things are progressing, and then I'm sure we'll meet with, well, that's with the commissioner, and then we'll see how things are progressing. And, you know, obviously the grant money, it needs to be applied for by August is the date. So would we get anything in by August this year to do something next year? We're not sure, but in the next year or two, I think everyone thinks that this can be done.
Mike, does the county own the property outside the zoo fence between there and First Avenue? Is Cook County own it?
Well, the
Or
county,
Forest Preserve
the
District?
county owns the zoo, so it's all forest preserve land, except for from the curb, it's Illinois Department of Transportation's right-of-way.
Okay.
I think
So
that's first 36 or 48 inches, right?
it's a small amount, and then after that, it's forest preserve. So
The reason that I ask is whichever government agency owns the property would have had to grant an easement to Commonwealth Edison. It might require ComEd to move their poles if they want to do improvements on there. If somebody pulls that and looks at it and they have that right, A, you could make them do it, B, you could negotiate with them and say either you move them or pay for the paths and we'll work around your poles.
okay.
And there might be a way to get some funding for it.
How far away is the right away from the street?
Which right-of-way?
Well, where the path would be built? Because you got the fence is what, 20 feet away maybe from the First Avenue?
I've seen many agreements that say that.
As far as we can do it.
And well, how does that look now?
I don't know exactly. The engineer's gonna come back with the actual measurements and costs. And if you put it basically up to the telephone poles or the fence, and you put an 8-foot wide, because it's gonna be 8 foot wide along our east property, and you continue 8 foot wide, there's still gonna be a good 10 feet or more from the curb, from the back of the curb. But as you go farther north, you'll see that
Narrows?
it narrows down until you get near 31st Street. And I didn't end up walking the entire way, but those who walked will tell you that it gets pretty tight up there. So I don't think the zoo is opposed to going behind the berm that is their sign. Or if someone wanted to build them a new berm farther back, that type of thing. All preliminary. And maybe we just go almost to 31st Street and go as far as we can without really running into major earth moving.
There was some, when we walked that path, and we got to the corner of 31st, there was room behind the berm, and there's room to just remove a portion of the fence and re-angle it so that it's a direct path behind the berm, and you come right back out on 31st. And all parties did not think that would be a major expense to do that. So again, it's just a matter of getting the numbers and then figuring out, is this something the municipalities and the school district can try to cover a portion to entice the commissioner and some of the local governments, Senator Sandoval and Land Act to get on board, and Lightford and some of those people. So
I think we're dealing with 2 or 3 senators
Right.
cover the area of the people that we're trying to service here.
I think it would benefit a lot of people for a
Yeah.
long time.
So when representatives of the Forest Preserve were there,
Yeah.
were there representatives of Brookfield Zoo there?
They come to some of the meetings. Sometimes they.
Because I would think they would benefit from having participants bike to the zoo, and they would want to be encouraged to have a bike path to their zoo coming from the Ogden side of the world, coming and biking,
Right.
and helping increase, maybe cut down some of this car traffic that they have.
They have been open, their last meeting they could not attend, but they sent a message and basically saying we are open to help get this through, including moving our fence or, having a look at altering some of our property. They can't cover the cost. That always seems to be the last.
Well, how far off is that road? That road's only 50, it's not that far off, is it? To use part of their road to possibly share? Because it's not that far off in that end, or is it?
Well, the fence that we're talking about moving it's about maybe 100 feet from the corner, 100 to 200 feet from the corner.
No, but I'm talking about
There
from that dead driveway entrance that sits on First Avenue. They have a road that's only about 100 yards in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think they're
That's their
wanting.
service road. I don't think they're wanting.
I don't think they're
anything with
wanting people to egress through the zoo property.
that. Right.
So they would be willing to move the
So if you put the
fence.
fence on the other side of that,
They would be willing to put the fence.
again, big picture, they get more people biking to the zoo? All right.
Well, even their employees.
And so then the plan is to get the bike path to go to Golf, and then go on the west side of Gulf, so you don't have to cross more than one street to get from 26th Street to the high school.
And there's a nice stoplight there.
Well, they're doing something there, it's heavy traffic, if you've been down there in the last few days.
They're
They're
major
redoing
redesign.
it, right.
Yes. Kevin, we didn't discuss operation and maintenance.
That's just the,
the
included
summary.
in the packet is Joel's quarterly business report
Okay.
that the finance council gets when we have our meeting, or the facilities council gets, so I include those for the board to read, just for them to see.
Kevin, I thought of one question. I talked to John after the meeting. On page 11 of the original handout, I, as you know, don't update it. It's page 3 of the report. At the bottom, it references the life safety and facilities assessment work orders. Are we charging the work that Joel's crew is doing to address life safety items to the life safety fund?
No, we talked about that today a little bit. Those were all the things that were identified in the life safety report that can be done just through our normal maintenance department and supply and repair budget. Very, very minor repairs or corrections. Now, we started to talk about, there are some other ones that are a little bigger, and we're gonna need to start putting a line item either in a life safety fund or in an operations fund, so that we dedicate, 50 or 100,000 a year for Joel to do some of these other repairs that are outside of their traditional maintenance budget.
I mean, two things. One is that our ability to fund life safety is a lot more flexible than other. So even if they're small projects, it seems like we should charge, and if that's what they are, why aren't we putting them into that fund?
Well, we didn't have the 8.9 million when the budget was established, so there's no money in that fund.
I understand it, so we'll be overdrawn. We can transfer money into the
Right, so
fund, right?
right now, these are just the minor ones that he can do through his traditional supply and repair budget.
Let me, I'm not asking you to defend it, I'm asking you to think a little, the different alternative. The second one is, we have to report it to the state, and we also have to report to the state we've made these life safety improvements, right? At least that's the way DLA.
Correct.
So isn't the easiest way to record all the work we've done in life safety is to charge it into a fund, so that we know, here's a life safety fund, here's everything we did in life safety, here's how much it cost?
That's kind of what we were talking about today.
Well, I think we were talking about the major types of things. I think what Joel's people, during the course of their normal workday, are doing some of those minor kinds of things.
I understand.
As part of what we're already paying them?
Yeah, I understand
Yeah,
what
there's
Tim's saying.
nothing
In this
additional.
way, when you look at item
It's much
157,
easier to
that might have been
report.
repairing a doorknob, you could say, look, we did that in.
Huh.
Right.
And I don't just understand why, if it's life safety work, why isn't charged to the life safety fund? That's what it's there for.
Well, plus the reporting function is just so much easier. Here,
Yeah.
we did it all.
Well, the reporting, Joel would have to keep track of his people's time, how much of their time is spent on the normal things that they do during the course of a day, and how much time is spent on these life safety type items.
Which is what that work order system is.
Yeah, that's what I mean, there already is a way of doing that,
Right.
right? How else could he have reported on this?
It's worth us, I'm not opposed to looking into what you're suggesting at all. Because we definitely started talking about that today, because we're starting to get through the ones like, some of them are as simple as changing out a doorknob here and a doorknob. Now we're getting into like, hey, we gotta retile a portion of a hallway.
Right.
Well, that's not something that's gonna be in the budget, so we should have those all being charged to the same line item. So we know we're getting the repairs done and how much it's costing us.
Right.
It just seems like it'd be easier, we've had in the past question of how much we spent, what it was in and all that, and it seems to me that would be an easy way. There's all the life safety work we did in the last, by the time you're done, it's gonna be could be up to a 10-year project, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm definitely, we can look into that.
And isn't there also advantages if down the road we need to go out and borrow money, right?
Yeah, that's the right point.
That was what you told us before.
Right?
You do not have to go to referendum for
Right.
life safety bonds.
Right. So if we carve off those expenditures annually,
and show that we still have more to complete.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
We would have to move the money into the life safety fund.
Understood,
We
but
know.
at least
Yeah,
we,
pay
we,
for it, yeah.
we have a story out there that says annually we're spending X dollars,
Well, we
life
talked,
safety.
we talked today about generating a couple line items under those funds so that there's a specific line item that's tennis, parking, and stadium. There's another specific line item for roofs. There's another, I think one of the issues that this board inherited when we were looking at the bills from the last project is, you know, it just said contractor, and it didn't say like whether it was for the roof over the pool or roof over the stadium, or I'm just using that as an example. So we already started talking about today that we need to create some specific line items for some of the big specific projects. So one of those would just be life safety repair, general life safety
Yeah.
repairs. You know, one could be stadium, one could be tennis courts, one could be parking.
Well, as
Makes
we
sense.
start to get into the budget season, with the band uniforms, you set up a procedure so that we're collecting money up front now. You know, now we will collect the money from the students so that when it's time to replace those uniforms, we'll already have the money in the bank. So as we start to draft the budget for next year, if we start to, as Gary was saying, part of our story is that we're always going to be putting money aside for life safety, then we're not in a situation where we don't have that money up front.
Right.
We're budgeting forward instead of,
Right, and that's what we talked about today. That's what that's what I keep referencing is putting in this budget, taking $2 million and putting it in the stadium fund, putting $100,000 a year in general life safety repairs, putting, you know, $1 million in a tennis court line item so that we, you know, try to earmark some of that money and then we can see how it matches up as we begin to do the work. You know, even though we haven't even, we're still in early stages with the stadium and that whole parking situation. You know, we're getting a couple quotes now that are all over $10,000–$12,000 just to do surveys and title searches to make sure that, you know, then we have to pay Carrie and her firm some preliminary money fees to do some preliminary drawings and start talking with MWRD on, you know, drainage and some of those. So, you know, we can spend $50,000 in the next 6 months or 4 months and not even have any concrete plans yet, you know, just on preliminary steps that we need to take to do this project. So we're going to start preparing those in the budget, and you'll start seeing that in the next month or two.
Kevin, anything on finance or personnel? I think you might have skipped that.
No updates at this time. Finance met, and we just discussed what I was just sharing with you. And so Tim and I had some work we need to do, and we'll be sharing that with the board in May.
Does anyone have any other questions for Kevin?
Well, you brought, when we had met at finance, you brought this William Blair presentation. So
That's going to
any-
be covered when Tim talks in his report.
Okay.